One of the issues that we always talk about freedom, we talk about private property rights. Why are private property rights so important? We have a growing division in our country between rich and poor. We're starting to hear all kinds of talk today about white privilege. Like if you're born white, suddenly you have all kinds of extra things that other people don't. And we've got to tear that down and take it away. And this is becoming a major issue in the country. And what we're seeing happen, though, not just white privilege, we're seeing a division growing, a large division between rich and poor. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And the United States has always had a very strong middle class. What is a middle class? You have the super powerful rich, and you have the very, very, very poor, and you have the middle. And usually the people in the middle are business people, they live in the more suburban neighborhoods and that sort of thing. Is this on? Now, back in 2000, the United Nations had a huge conference called the Millennium Summit. And out of that summit came what they called the Millennium Project. The Millennium Project had 8 points to it, specifically how they were going to eliminate poverty by the year 2015. This is a big deal. As was mentioned, I debated in England at Cambridge University before a 200-year-old debating society on the issue of the United Nations is a dead loss. That was what we were debating on. I was on the positive side, yes it is. On the other side was the UK ambassador, former UK ambassador to the UN, the head of the Liberal Party in Parliament, and a gentleman by the name of Salih Shetty, who was the head of the UN's Millennium Project. This was given the job, the Millennium Project, given the job to implement the 8 points of the Millennium Declaration. And just before we went into debate, we had this big formal dinner. Just before we went into debate, I had ignored Mr. Shetty sitting next to me through most of the dinner. I didn't really care to talk to him too much. But just before we went into debate, I turned to him and I said, "You realize you don't have a prayer, don't you?" And he said, "About what?" And I said, "Ending poverty by 2015, which was their goal, using redistribution of wealth." And he looked at me and he said, "Yeah, I know." Didn't stop him from spending all the money and setting all the goals. Here's the facts in the world. 1.2 billion people live in poverty. 50,000 deaths per day occur worldwide due to poverty. 10 million children die of hunger and preventable disease every year. More than half of the world's population lives on less than $2 per day. 800 million people go to bed hungry every night. And that wasn't because they were putting a time out and they had to go to bed. In the United States, the annual income for Americans is $41,400. We have the highest standard of living in the world, and we have the longest lifespan. Now, why is that? Africa has more natural resources than we do. Japan has more industry. And in education, the United States ranks below the top 10. What are we, 26 or something in the world? So why are we the richest nation on earth? Why do we have the most prosperity? Why do we have the longest lifespan, the highest standard of living? There's one major difference. Ownership of private property. You go down to the county recorder's office. The county recorder's office is the most powerful tool for freedom in the world, because here every single bit of property that someone owns is registered. It can be big equipment, it can be your home, it can be some other things, your property. Now, okay, so why is that important? Because once you can prove that your property is yours, then you can use it to what we call equity. It has value. You can take that property and you can take out loans on it. You know that 60% of the businesses in this country were started by individuals using the equity in their property? And 60% of the American people work for these companies? Not the great big huge corporations, what we call mom and pop companies. This is what builds an economy. It's what builds prosperity. And the United States is one of the only nations in the world that has such a system. This is the reason why America soared. We're 200 some years old, 39 years old this year. And yet, we have had more prosperity than nations that are thousands of years old. You know, you take a look at Greece right now, where civilization basically started. So, something that we have to understand. People create jobs. People create prosperity, not government. Government takes it away. Government doesn't create this. You start hearing politicians talk about, I'm going to create jobs for America. No, you're not. If you want to create jobs, Mr. Politician, then get out of the way and get government out of the way and let the people do what the people do. People every day. Why do we have so many things that are, something that, who thought of some of these things? You hear the example of the little plastic things on the end of a shoelace, so you can get it into the hole in there. Who had time to think of that? An individual sitting there going, I can't get this piece of rope in here. What am I going to do? Not a government bureaucrat. Yeah.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly. And that's what people do. And the necessity can be several things. The necessity can be doing it, that you need to do it. The necessity could be, I need to make some money. What can I do to make some money? People begin to put together their creativity and make that happen. No government bureaucrat ever had any creativity that way, unless it was to think about, they're not taxing this little piece over here. How about if we tax it? There's their creativity. How to put more burden on you. Now, what you have when someone decides to start their own business, that businessman takes on a risk, puts his money up to make it work, puts his idea out there. He's the one in the beginning that starts knocking on doors, trying to sell his product. And when his company starts to grow to a point where he can't handle everything, then he starts to hire other people to come in. And he has a contract with them. He has an agreement. You come and work for me, I'll pay you this many dollars an hour. Now we have government telling us, you have to pay people this much. And the businessman says, wait a minute. If I do that, I can't compete with my competition. I can't make a profit. I can't keep the business going. If a business doesn't make a profit, there is no business. Businesses are not government or public utilities. They are private property. And for government to tell people this is the way you have to run it, what you begin to see is a diminishing of government, of business. You're making it more and more impossible to start businesses. But this system has existed in the United States, and this is what made us so prosperous. In almost every other country of the world, private property ownership doesn't exist. In some countries, private property ownership is outright banned. In many more, the government doesn't provide a way to record people's property, so there's no way to prove that it's theirs. Other nations allow private property, but they make it nearly impossible to obtain. They have fees, rules, and regulations. For example, Mexico. You can have private property ownership in Mexico, but it takes over 20 years before a piece of property can be recorded as yours. And you know how many little palms are greased as they do that, as bureaucrats have their hands out? Oh, I can do that for you, but, you know. How much money does it take to get your property registered? In the Philippines, to finance the buying of property, you have to literally organize your own neighborhood where you want to buy the property, kind of put your own homeowners association together in order to qualify. They all have to vote to agree you can buy this property and make it yours. That entire process could take 168 steps involving 53 public and private agencies and take 13 to 15 years. In Peru, to legally register a new business, it took a team of experts who were working on this to check it out, to see how it worked. 289 days to start a business, to get it registered, be able to open it, and that was after paying over $1,200 in registration fees. If you live in a poor country, $1,200 and all that work with the bureaucrats discourages you from trying to start a business, and so you don't. What results in this around the world is what economist Hernando de Soto calls dead capital. There is over $9.5 trillion worth of dead capital property around the world that nobody can earn from, nobody can gain wealth from. It just sits there. And what is the result? Teeming poverty throughout the world. Think what would happen if those folks could own their own property and could build their equity and build their own wealth. We would eliminate poverty. That is why private property is so important. It is the way to build wealth and get rid of property for individuals. It's the way for an individual to have his own hopes and dreams and desires and goals, to achieve them. What's he left with without it? Despair. Private property. If you don't have private property to stand on, then all the other rights that you think you have, where are you going to declare them? Where are you going to defend them? If you're standing on government property, you can't declare them. We're seeing this today. You can't go into a school and declare your religion. You can't go into into government property, and in many cases you can't exercise your Second Amendment rights. You can't exercise your First Amendment rights. You know what they do now? If they think there's a big protest coming up, they set up a little area here saying, this is the free speech area we have deemed. My friend Michael Badnarik, who was a 2004 candidate for president of the Libertarian Party, said, wherever I am is a free speech area. So, imagine the world where nobody can identify who owns what. We have chaos, we have thieves, the biggest bully wins, no ability to keep your possessions. Of course, today we call that government. So, but people own homes in nations where private property ownership isn't legal. What about that? How do they assess their value? Hernando de Soto, I mentioned earlier, he wrote a book called The Mystery of Capital, Why It Works in the West and Nowhere Else. He has been in meetings with over 57 heads of state in the world. At least that's when I met with him a couple years ago. That's what he said. These are heads of state that want to find out how to end poverty in their countries. But a whole lot of them, one of them was Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, they really don't want to hear about this private property thing. They'll tell him, our people aren't ready for that. So he told me, one day he knew he was going to meet with such a state leader. And so he sent a team of his people out in the neighborhood around the presidential palace, knocking on doors. And he said that these people would say, excuse me, do you own your property? And they'd say, yes, I do. They said, do you have any proof of that? This is in a nation where private property ownership isn't, recognized by the government, isn't legal. And they'd say, yes, I do. And they would come out, they'd have a receipt, they would have maybe an inheritance, some kind of a document that showed that in their mind they owned this property. They made copies of all these documents, and Hernando took them into this meeting, and he puts them on the table in front of them, and he says, before we get started, let's get this out of the way. Your people know what private property is, and they're ready for it. Now let's do what we have to do to give it to them. So, but that's, they don't ever want to give it up. So, what we're dealing with today, and what the Millennium Project was dealing with, was redistribution of wealth. This is their answer to get rid of poverty. When I debated at Cambridge, my whole premise was that every single program coming out of the United Nations was based on redistribution of wealth. And that's exactly what the Millennium Project is working on. One of the things that come out of the United Nations is a theory, what they call zero economic growth. Think about that for a minute. Zero economic growth. They want top-down control in a well-ordered society. And just to digress a minute, when you think back to the time of Alexander the Great and Thomas Jefferson, now, there were a lot of progress that took place in human civilization during that time, a lot of inventions, but the fact is, the world still moved at the same pace between Alexander the Great and Thomas Jefferson. They still rode horseback, they still lit their homes with candles. Along comes about 1890, 4 individuals showed up in human society, in American society. Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and the Wright brothers. And they revolutionized human society. They threw a monkey wrench into a well-ordered society. They messed it up good. We had a different way for transportation. We had a different way to light our homes. And oh my goodness, we had men flying with the birds. Unheard of. Witchcraft. Today, and I'll talk tonight about Agenda 21 and Sustainable Development. This is right down to it. But we have a cartel in this world that is trying to stop any kind of human progress that will rock the boat of their well-ordered society. And they want to make sure that there never again rises a boat rocker like Thomas Edison or Henry Ford or the Wright brothers. We hear a lot about democracy today. Democracy, we have a democracy. You know what democracy is. 3 wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for lunch. And that's exactly what we're seeing happen to our private property today. We're seeing government decide what we're going to do with our property. Well, this thing with redistribution of wealth, I want to show you how this operates. It's what I call the compassion cartel. You have a combination of private charities that are trying to do good, that are trying to help the poor, and you have government programs with billions and billions of dollars being spent to help the poor. Let me show you how the compassion cartel operates. I want to volunteer. I want somebody who would like to be a businessman, businesswoman. Come on up. Okay. Now, what kind of business would you like to start?
I don't know.
Well, gee, maybe we should get a government grant to do a survey to find out what kind of business we need. You like clothes? Okay. Like to design your own, maybe, sometimes?
Sure.
Whatever, right? Okay, so we have a clothing design store. Okay. Now, you start to you first have to create the designs, then you have to sell them. You have to get somebody to buy them. And you might have to put on a show to show them or something. And so you do all this. You get the money to invest to make that happen. It's your money. You're making that happen. And you've got to get that money back. So the way you do that is you sell the products for more than you're paying for them. That's called profit, right? And you got a family to take care of. I assume you're married, right? Sure. Yeah, sure, yeah. Probably 2 or 3 kids and 14 more on the way and all that, right? Okay. So you've got to make sure you make a lot of money, right? And you do, you know. It starts out small. You get lots of ones, you know. And the business starts to grow, and it goes up to 5s. You know, that's getting good, right? You're not in this business, you know. 10s, 20s, 50s. Oh, this is a good business. We have reached $100 bills coming into your business. Now, it's true, you've got all this money, but you've got overhead. You've got rent to pay, you've got employees, and you're not going to allow them to demonstrate that they need to be paid a whole lot more, are you? That's no, kick those people out. And but you have this overhead, and you got the cost of the products and so forth. Okay, so you have all that on, and of course government decides they need about 40 or 50% of it themselves, because after all they're government, and you know this is how they earn money, is they steal it from you, right? But even in spite of all those costs, you are a generous person. You're a caring person. And you're concerned about people around the world, or even in our own country, who don't have enough to live on. You know, it breaks your heart to see people, you know, sleeping in subways and kicked out of their homes and in homeless shelters and things like that. And you'd like to help them, wouldn't you? I need a few folks like this. Who's living in a homeless shelter right now? I need 4 or 5 people who are over here. Yeah, come on up. Come on up. Everybody with their hand up. Come on up. Can we come over? Let's come over here. Let's see. Come over here. Come over here, guys. All right. Now you stand right here.
Right here?
Okay. Yeah. What's your name? I'm sorry.
Kay.
Kay. Okay. I can spell that. Okay. You guys stand over here. Now, you all have a really sad story to tell. It's how did you get on the streets?
I gamble too much.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it happens, yeah. You look like a drug user. Is that what it was? Yeah. You got one?
I have no arms.
No arms, okay. All right. You guys are really pathetic. You got a story?
Too much candy.
Too much candy. You know, I had that problem. That's a monkey on your back. That is really scary. Yeah. What do you got?
House burned down.
Your house burned down? These guys are creative, aren't they? That's it.
I made very poor investment decisions.
Oh, yeah.
I never made it past the first grade.
These are really pathetic people. And they really, you know, your heart's breaking, isn't it? You really want to help them. Okay. So you've got some money. What would you like to donate?
20s, 50s, 20s, 50s.
Oh, wait a minute. 50? That's how you're running your business. And don't you want to maybe just get some ones to start with?
Ones?
Probably some ones, yeah.
That's not a lot.
Now, you got to hand it to them. Go ahead. Oh, wait. You can't do that.
What?
We need government bureaucrats to make sure this runs properly.
You gotta pay his bills first.
Well, he already did. This is what's left. This is what's left.
Oh, you already paid the government.
Yeah, we've already paid all that. This is what's left. This is the 20% she has left. Yeah. But you can't just, I mean, how could we trust that this money you're giving them isn't counterfeiters? And we need government bureaucrats. So I need a government bureaucrat up here. And, you know what, I've got, what do I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 poor people. I need at least 5 more government bureaucrats. So, you know, this is a one-on-one business here. So now you stand over here. Now my bureaucrats need to stand over here. You're in between. Now stand right there. Stand here. Guys, face back here. Stand over here. Okay. Now, you give them the money you were going to give them. Okay. Now you're going to, no wait. Now, you need to pass it out to all the bureaucrats first. And let's see, when they've done all that, how much we have for the poor. What you got there for the poor? Yeah, yeah, that's about right. You guys, yeah, okay. Yeah, just give that to the poor. Here, give it, pass it out to them. Now, this is the compassion cartel. This is how it operates. And the trouble with this is, not one single discussion is taking place on how to get these people off getting this help. We just know we need to get more and more and more. How do they get off? So what you end up with as time goes by, first of all, we'll get to the rest of your money in a minute. We keep getting more poor. I need some more poor. I need more because it's growing. We've got more people who need help. I need more. I need more. Come on up. Come on up. We need more. How am I doing on time? Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
My kitty is first.
All right. Yeah.
11:30.
Okay.
20 more minutes.
Okay. All right. Now, obviously, as the need grows, the desperate need for government grows. We need more bureaucrats. We need people to oversee the administrators to make sure that they're passing the money down where they're supposed to pass it. Not to the poor, but to the government. So I need more bureaucrats. Now, this situation is getting out of hand. This is no longer, we don't have room for this to be a charity anymore. We got the tax going here. And so, we've got at least this much has to go to the bureaucrats.
It's on my cards numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. You need to distribute that a little faster. Government really uses money much faster than that. Now, keep in mind, you've got to have something for the poor there. You got a really nice house outside of Washington, don't you? It's, off of your government money. You've got all kinds of benefits and a really beautiful house and so forth. You're not homeless, are you?
No.
No. Because you're doing good work here. You're really helping the poor, right? Yeah. 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 She says she just wanted to give $1 to the poor. You poor thing. And by the way, while you're having to pay this new tax, what do you have to do? You have to raise the price of your product because you're not getting enough money in to keep you off the poor list here, right? Well, eventually, the next year, the next tax comes. Oh, here, there's $5. This is how we are operating in this country, and what's happening as this is taking place is that we're getting more and more poor. And eventually, you don't have any more money, do you? So, you got to get in line with the rest of those poor people. This is how it grows.
I can live in my refrigerator box.
You understand? Okay. That's what I wanted you to understand. This is what it really looks like. The more government, the less the poor get. The more government gets, the less she has left. That's the compassion cartel. Thank you very much. You guys can put your money over here because I'm collecting it. Now I'm the government, yes.
Poor kid.
Thank you very much. When I debated at Cambridge, after the debate was over, I had, there was a reception afterwards, and there were like 400 people, students and other people there, and we all go into this reception. I actually was the only debater who went there, and I held court for the next 2 hours on this subject because as I was walking in, this young lady, a student at Cambridge University, one of the top universities in the world, a bright girl, I could tell she was very bright, walked up to me and said, "Excuse me, can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "You really don't believe in redistribution of the wealth?" And I said, "Of course not, it's theft." And she said, "But if somebody has more than they need, shouldn't they share that with others who don't?" And I said, "Why should they?" Now I've got 25 people standing around me. Eventually I had 50 people standing around me. And she's, you know, what I wanted to scream was Economics 101. It doesn't work. It has never worked. Socialism doesn't work. Margaret Thatcher said, eventually you run out of other people's money. Did we not just see that? That's what happens. Government is a massive vacuum. It sucks down the money, the spirit, and the property of all the people it gets in contact with. That's why we advocate that government get out of the way and let people do what they will do. And you know what will happen if we have the businesses prosper, if people begin to prosper and we find a way for other people to get out of being poor, which is, by the way, the reason why the Statue of Liberty stands there and says, "Give me your poor, your wretched masses," because the idea was we didn't want them all to come in here and be poor. Everybody knew if you came to the United States, the streets were paved in gold because everybody here was rich. That was the way they viewed America. Obviously, it's a little exaggerated, but people were able to move up in their station. There was no caste system. They didn't have to stand below the lords and the ladies. They could become them themselves. And that is why they came. Why? Because America had free enterprise and it had private property, and you could prove it. And that's the way it worked. So, the real answer to eliminating poverty isn't redistribution of wealth. Here's an interesting point. Growth of government. The Millennium Project had 8 points on how they were going to eliminate poverty around the world by 2015. That totally, utterly, completely failed. They never got anybody off the poor rolls. They got millions more on it. That's their success. So what do they do when they succeed? At this very moment, the UN is working on a new plan to, what do I do with it? They are creating a new plan that has, all right, 17, here it is, has 17 points doing exactly the same thing for the year 2030. We're going to give it another 15 years for a shot. This is how they operate. Total failed government policies did not work, so we'll just double it. We'll do more. And that's what they're going to do. So, how do we get people out of poverty? No. You allow people to be free. Government get out of the way. Let free men be able to benefit from their own labor. Private property ownership with fewer rules and regulations, and make government get out of the way. That's how you do it. Interesting thing is, in America, now that we are implementing Agenda 21 and Sustainable Development, private property ownership is on the downswing. And what's happening in America? We're getting poorer and less free. Get government out of the way. Private property ownership. Build your own wealth, your own hopes and dreams, and live free. Thank you.